Dad's dead. It's time we talk about our share. That was how my problem began. Not with grief, not with silence, but with my daughter's voice flat, sharp, impatient, cutting through a house that still smelled like my husband's aftershave. My name is Margaret Hale. I am 68 years old. And 6 days after my husband of 43 years was buried, my own daughter sat across from me and spoke to me like I was an obstacle standing between her and money. I want to be clear from the beginning, because I need you to understand exactly what kind of situation I was trapped in. Julia is my only child. She is 46, intelligent, ambitious, and utterly ruthless when she believes something belongs to her. The man who had just died, Robert Hale, was her father, my husband, and the man who built every bit of the life she now wanted to strip away from me. We were sitting in the sunroom of my house, the one Robert and I bought when Julia was still in elementary school, the one where he collapsed in the hallway just a week ago, where I knelt beside him waiting for the ambulance, praying he would squeeze my hand one more time. Julia didn't mention any of that. She had a leather folder on the table, already opened, documents neatly aligned. She had come prepared. I had come grieving. "I'm not ready to discuss this," I said, pushing the folder slightly away from me. That was the moment her mask cracked. Her jaw tightened. "Mom, don't do this." "Do what?" I asked quietly. "Play confused. Play fragile. We both know how this works." The words stung more than I expected. I had spent my life being the steady one, the woman who managed the household, raised a child, supported a man through decades of work. And now, in her eyes, I was pretending. "I just buried your father," I said. "I need time." Julia laughed. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp. "Time is exactly what we don't have. Assets get messy when widows hesitate." "Widows? Not my mother? Not Mom." She slid the folder back toward me with force. Papers fanned out. Signature tabs glared at me in yellow. "Sign," she said. "All of it. The house, the lake place, the investment accounts. We'll transfer everything cleanly. I'll make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. I looked at the documents but didn't touch them. My hands were trembling not because I was weak, but because something inside me was breaking. "Those were your father's wishes?" I asked. Her eyes darkened. "Don't hide behind him. I'm asking—" "You're stalling," she snapped, "and I'm done being patient." She stood so abruptly her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You think you're being sentimental. What you're actually being is selfish." Selfish. The word landed like a slap. "I gave you everything," she continued, her voice rising. "You lived comfortably because of his work, and now you want to sit on it? For what? To feel important?" I stood too, my legs unsteady. "Lower your voice." She leaned in. "Or what?" The silence between us was thick, dangerous. "I'm your mother," I said, barely above a whisper. "And you're in my way," she replied. Then she did something I will never forget. There was a glass of water on the table left over from when she arrived. She picked it up, her eyes never leaving mine, and before I could understand what she was doing, she threw it straight into my face. Cold water soaked my hair, my blouse, my chest. It dripped down onto the floor, onto the papers, onto the picture frame of my husband nearby. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because of the water, but because of the humiliation. I stood there, drenched, stunned, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. Julia exhaled sharply, as if I had pushed her too far. "Get a grip," she said. "You're acting pathetic." Something inside me collapsed then. Not loudly, quietly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply stepped back and let my hand fall away from the table. "I'm not signing anything today," I said. Her face twisted with rage. "You don't have a choice." "I do," I replied. She scoffed. "You think you do, but you don't. Not if you want to keep seeing Liam." There it was, the threat she'd been holding back. Liam. The boy, she said, was my grandson, the child she kept just out of reach, the child she guarded like a secret. "You wouldn't," I said. She smiled. And that smile told me everything. I turned away from her, my clothes still soaked, my heart pounding painfully in my chest. I walked to the mantel where Robert's urn sat beside his photograph. "I trusted you," I said, not turning around. "You trusted the wrong person," she answered coolly. She gathered the documents, already confident, already certain she would win. We'll finish this tomorrow, dry off. Then she left me there wet, shaking, and grieving not just for my husband, but for the daughter I no longer recognized. Later that night, alone in my bedroom, I replayed everything: the anger, the cruelty, the desperation behind her eyes. And a thought I had been avoiding finally became impossible to ignore. People who are telling the truth don't panic like that. I sat on the edge of the bed and whispered into the dark, "What are you hiding, Julia?" I didn't have the answer yet, but I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. My daughter wasn't fighting for inheritance. She was fighting to keep a lie buried. And whatever that lie was, it was powerful enough to make her pour water on her own mother and call it justice. This was no longer just about money. This was about survival. If you feel for Margaret, hit like and drop your city in the comments. You might not be watching alone. I woke the next morning with the faint ache of dried salt on my cheeks and the weight of a memory I couldn't shake. The wet clothes were gone, folded neatly at the foot of my bed by Maria, our housekeeper for over 20 years, but the sting of humiliation was still fresh on my skin. The house was quiet, too quiet. I reached for my robe and paused by the window. The sun had barely risen over the treetops, casting long fingers of light across the dew-covered grass. Normally, this time of year, the cusp between spring and summer brought comfort. But today, everything felt different. Suspicious. Cold. I made my way to the kitchen and found Maria at the stove. She turned quickly, her eyes softening when they met mine. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale," she said gently. "I left your tea in the pot. Earl Grey." "Thank you, Maria," I said, my voice more hoarse than I intended. She hesitated, then asked in a whisper, "Is everything all right with Miss Julia?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wasn't sure how much I could say without breaking again. Maria had been with us since Julia was in braces. She had seen more than she ever commented on. Perhaps that was loyalty, or wisdom. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat by the window overlooking the garden. Robert's roses had started to bloom again, deep red, his favorite. It was always his ritual: prune them on Sundays, hum Sinatra while he worked, come inside with dirt under his nails and that boyish grin on his face. He would have hated what Julia had done to me yesterday. I reached for the small notebook I kept tucked inside the kitchen drawer. It was supposed to be for recipes, but now I opened to a blank page and wrote, "Day 6 after Robert. Julia demanded I sign over assets. Called me selfish. Threw water in my face. Mentioned Liam as leverage." I didn't know why I started writing it all down, but something told me I might need these records, if not for court, then for my own sanity. I sipped my tea slowly, eyes drifting to the upstairs hallway. I hadn't seen Liam since the funeral, and I was beginning to wonder why. Julia always had excuses. He's resting. Or he's overwhelmed. But even at 9 years old, a child should want to be near his family, shouldn't he? Unless he didn't feel like family. Around 10, I heard the unmistakable sound of her heels. Julia never walked, she clicked, like a metronome counting down someone else's time. She swept into the kitchen like she owned the air I was breathing. "Mom," she said, "all business. We're meeting with the notary at noon. I assume you'll be dressed." "No." She blinked. "No?" I turned to her. I said, "No, I'm not signing anything. Not until I understand what's going on." Her expression hardened. "You're overreacting. Again." "I don't think I am," I said. "And I have questions." "About what?" she snapped. "Dad's gone. The will's clear. I'm the executor. All you're doing is delaying what's inevitable." "About Liam," I said quietly. That stopped her cold. "What about him?" Her voice lost its sharpness, but only slightly. It was replaced by something closer to threat. "He hasn't said a word to me. Not one. Not even a hello." I leaned forward. "I know when a child is coached, Julia. I was a teacher for over 30 years. She crossed her arms. "He's shy." "No," I said. "He's scared." That did it. Her face flushed deep red. "You're paranoid. Maybe that fall you took last year did more than bruise your hip." I stood slowly. "You will not insult me in my own home." She laughed, bitter and thin. "Is that what this is about? Pride? You'd rather sit on a pile of rotting memories than make sure your family is secure?" "Family," I said, stepping closer, "doesn't throw water on you when they don't get their way." The silence between us was raw, open, Then she turned, muttering, "This is ridiculous." She stormed out of the kitchen, and for a moment, I let her go. I needed air. I needed clarity. I grabbed my shawl and stepped out onto the back porch. The morning had bloomed into something almost beautiful. A mockingbird called from the oak tree. Somewhere in the distance, a lawnmower hummed. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt unease, a gnawing, steady presence. I remembered something then. Robert once told me not long before he died, "If something ever happens to me, don't let her move too fast. Julia's smart, but speed hides motive." At the time, I thought he was just rambling. Now I wasn't so sure. Back inside, I waited until I heard Julia leave for the store. She always narrated her errands loudly, a performance more than a courtesy. I went upstairs, careful with each step. Liam's door was closed. I knocked. Once, twice. No answer. "Liam?" I asked gently. Still silence. I opened the door slowly. The room was dim, curtains drawn. No toys, no photos, nothing personal. A suitcase stood by the closet, half unzipped. The boy wasn't there. A chill ran down my spine. Where was he? I went to Julia's room next. I had never snooped before, but today, I didn't feel like the same mother who had packed school lunches and kissed scraped knees. In her drawer, beneath a pile of scarves, I found a folder. Another folder. Inside, adoption papers, from another state, dated just 3 months ago. My fingers went cold. No name for the father. Mother listed, Julia Williams. Child's name, Liam. Last name redacted. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands trembling. This boy, this child she had paraded as my grandson, had only entered her life after Robert was diagnosed, and she never told me. Never once. She used him. She brought him into our home to manipulate a dying man, and now she was using him again to push me into silence. I closed the folder, heart hammering in my chest. This was bigger than inheritance, bigger than money. Julia was playing a long game. But I had just taken my first real move, and I wasn't backing down. The folder shook in my hands, not from its weight, but from what it confirmed. Liam wasn't her biological son. He was a pawn, a tool, brought into our lives just in time to earn Robert's sympathy while he was too ill to question much. Julia had always been strategic, but this was something else. Cold, calculated, criminal. I placed the folder back exactly where I'd found it. Julia was many things, but careless was not one of them. If she suspected I'd been snooping, she'd retaliate, and I needed time. By the time she returned home, I was already back in the kitchen, my notebook tucked discreetly behind the spice rack, the kettle boiling, and a calm expression pasted over my real thoughts. "You're quiet," she said, pulling off her jacket and slinging it over a chair. "I'm tired," I replied, pouring myself a fresh cup of tea. She studied me carefully. I could feel her eyes scanning my face, searching for something: fear, hesitation, guilt. I gave her none of it. "Did you speak to the notary?" she asked. I did not. Julia exhaled harshly, rubbing her temples. "We're wasting time, Mom. Every day you stall makes this messier." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the sink and rinsed my cup slowly. Inside, I was humming with energy alert, focused, quietly furious. That night, I retrieved the old recorder Robert used to use for his lectures when he guest taught at the university. It was dusty, but it worked. I tested the battery, replaced the memory card, and hid it behind the cookie jar on the counter, the one Julia never touched. I pressed record the next morning, before she came downstairs. I'd decided I wasn't going to confront her anymore. I was going to listen. Wait. Let her reveal herself in her own words. She didn't disappoint. By noon, she was pacing the living room on a call, speaking in clipped tones. "No, she hasn't signed yet. Yes, I tried that, I told you. If we push too hard, she might get suspicious. She's old, but she's not stupid." I stood just beyond the doorframe, heart pounding. Not because of what she was saying, but because of what she wasn't. Any sense of shame. She was talking to someone, a man, from the sound of it. And the way she said "we" made me realize this wasn't her plan alone. When she left to meet a friend for lunch, I took the opportunity to return to her room. Not the drawers this time, her laptop. It was locked, of course, but Robert had once helped her reset the password when she forgot it years ago. I remembered the phrase. It was an old joke between her and her college roommate. Vodkantia 88. I typed it in. It worked. The desktop was clean, too clean. But the email app had a recently deleted folder. There, buried among dozens of marketing messages, was one thread that made my blood turn cold. From robert.hale.law@gmail.com to julia.williams.sq@gmail.com. Subject, adoption. Yulia, I understand you feel this is a solution, but I'm not comfortable with how sudden this is. We haven't spoken about children in years, and now weeks after my diagnosis you show up with papers? You say the boy needs a family, but something doesn't feel right. Margaret doesn't know. I want to talk to her. I think we should wait. Dad. The date on the email was 8 months ago. Julia never mentioned this. She had gone behind my back, and his. She knew he was sick, and instead of using that time to reconnect, to comfort him, she used it to manipulate his heart. I scrolled further. There were responses from her, sharp and defensive, but the last one, the one that stopped me cold, was this. He trusts me. That's enough. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I closed the laptop, feeling sick. She hadn't adopted Liam out of love. She had brought him in as a symbol, an emotional shield, and worse, she had used him to wedge herself deeper into Robert's final decisions. I went back to my notebook that night and wrote everything down. The email, the phone call, the tone in her voice. I was no longer just suspicious. I was preparing a case. Later that evening, while Julia was in the bathtub, I crept back to the kitchen and retrieved the recorder. I played it back, listened to her entire call again. The man's name never came up, but I caught something else. She said, "As soon as the transfer is done, we don't need to stay here anymore." There was someone else. A partner. Maybe someone who helped her fake the adoption. Maybe even someone who coached her on how to appear like the grieving daughter. I would find out. I would find out everything. Because Robert may have died with doubt in his heart, but I would not. I would uncover what he suspected. And I would not let Julia walk away with everything he built while dragging our family name through the dirt. I waited until Julia left the house. It was nearly noon when she finally grabbed her oversized tote bag and announced she had a business call in town. I offered a soft nod, keeping my eyes on the teacup in front of me, pretending to be disinterested. She didn't suspect a thing. The moment the front door clicked shut, I stood. Today, I was going to speak to Liam. Not as his supposed grandmother. Not as a grieving mother, but as a woman who could smell fear, lies, and a child being used as a chess piece. I climbed the stairs slowly, careful not to let the old hardwood creak too loudly. His room was down the hall, the one that used to be Robert's study before he moved his desk downstairs. Julia had insisted it be convenient to keep Liam nearby. I paused outside the door. A light knock. "Liam?" I said gently. No response. I knocked again. "It's me, Margaret. Can I come in?" Still silence. I waited another second, then slowly turned the knob. The room was dim, the curtains half closed. Liam sat on the floor, legs crossed, eyes glued to a tablet. He didn't look up when I entered. I stood in the doorway a moment, taking it in. The space was sterile, no photos, no posters, no personal touches, just a few books lined on a shelf and a small suitcase by the closet. "Hi," I said softly, walking in. He shifted slightly but said nothing. "Mind if I sit?" He shrugged, the tiniest lift of his shoulders. I took it as a yes. I lowered myself to the edge of the bed, careful not to startle him. "You like cartoons?" I asked, nodding at the screen. He gave the smallest nod. I watched him for a while, trying to find a crack in the carefully rehearsed silence. "Your mom says you're really smart." Still no answer. I tried again. "You know, when your mom was your age, she used to sneak cookies from the kitchen and hide them in her pillowcase. She thought I didn't notice." That got a faint twitch of his mouth, almost a smile. "She was stubborn too," I added. "Never liked being told what to do." He finally looked up at me. His eyes were wide, brown, and full of something that made my heart ache. "Caution." I leaned forward a little. "Liam, can I ask you something?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Do you remember when you first met your mom?" He blinked. It was such a small reaction, but it told me everything. Most children don't have to remember meeting their mothers. He swallowed and looked down at the tablet again. I tried to soften my voice even further. It's okay if you don't want to answer. I'm just trying to understand. He mumbled something I couldn't quite catch. What was that, sweetheart? He looked at me again. She said, I'm not supposed to talk about the house. The house? I repeated. He nodded. The house before, with the dog and the lady with the red hair. My chest tightened. There had been another home, another woman, a dog. Someone, Liam remembered. Someone he'd been told to forget. I reached out carefully, placing a hand on the edge of the blanket near him, not touching him. Did your mom tell you not to talk to me? He hesitated again, then whispered. She said you'd be sad and confused. I felt my throat close. Oh, Liam, I said, my voice barely holding steady. You don't have to lie to protect anyone, okay? Not with me. He looked down again, like he was afraid he'd already said too much. I didn't push. I just sat there with him, letting the silence stretch, giving him permission to breathe. After a few minutes, I stood. Thank you for talking with me, I said. You were very brave. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small wooden toy car Robert had carved it years ago. I'd found it in the attic and cleaned it off just that morning. This was your grandpa's favorite, I said. He made it himself. Liam took it slowly, reverently. He nodded, and for the first time he whispered, Thank you, Grandma. The word broke something open inside me, not because it was sweet, but because it was real. Not coached, not forced. His voice trembled like it had to climb over fear to reach me. I left the room, my hands shaking. Back downstairs, I opened my notebook again. Day 7. Liam remembers another home. A dog. A woman with red hair. Julia told him not to talk to me. He's scared. But he wants to trust someone. He called me Grandma. It wasn't rehearsed. It was real. That night, when Julia returned, I was in the kitchen again. She didn't ask where I'd been, but I noticed how her eyes darted toward the stairs. She was worried, and she had every reason to be, because I wasn't grieving anymore. I was documenting, and now, I wasn't just trying to protect what was mine. I was trying to protect that boy, whoever he truly was. The next morning, I waited until Julia left for her yoga therapy, a routine she never skipped, even when Robert was in hospice. She liked routines that kept her image intact. As soon as the car backed out of the driveway, I moved. I headed straight for Robert's study. Though we'd moved most of his work to the first floor after his diagnosis, there were still 2 filing cabinets left behind, untouched since the funeral. Julia hadn't bothered to go through them. Maybe she thought it was all sentimental junk, or maybe she didn't know where to look. But I did. I pulled open the second drawer, the one labeled Legal, Private. Neatly arranged files stretched back decades, tax records, business correspondence. A few old case files from when Robert was still consulting. And tucked between folders labeled Trust, Setup, and Medical Directives, I found a manila envelope with no label. I opened it. Inside, a single check stub, dated 6 months before Robert's death. It was a donation, or that's what it was labeled as, $25,000 made out to a community transitions program in Charlotte, North Carolina. It stood out for 2 reasons. First, Robert never donated without telling me. And second, we'd never had any connection to Charlotte. I pulled out my phone and typed the name of the organization into a browser. The result made my breath catch. Community Transitions Program, Licensed Foster to Adopt Placement and Legal Services. Adoption. Julia. This wasn't a donation. It was a transaction. I took a photo of the stub, placed everything back exactly as I found it, and returned to the kitchen. Maria was folding napkins at the table. She looked up as I entered. Maria, I said, keeping my voice low, do you remember Mr. Hanley, the attorney Robert always used? She nodded slowly. Of course, kind man. He came to the Christmas party once, I think. Do you know if he's still practicing? I think so. He has an office on Briarwood. I smiled. Would you happen to have his number? Maria didn't ask why. She never did. She went to the drawer where we kept spare address books, flipped through a few pages, and handed me a business card. Thank God for old-fashioned records. I excused myself to the porch, dialed the number with shaky hands, and waited. Hanley and Brooks Law Office. This is Marlene speaking. "Hello," I said, steadying my voice. "May I speak to Mr. Hanley?" "It's Margaret Hale." There was a pause. Then, "One moment, please, Mrs. Hale." A few seconds later, a warm, familiar voice came through. "Margaret, my dear, I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you, Richard," I said. "I wish this was just a courtesy call, but I'm concerned. I need to ask you a few questions." He listened patiently as I explained Julia's pressure about the inheritance, the sudden adoption, and the $25,000 check to an out-of-state agency. "She says the will gives her power over the entire estate," I said, "but I haven't seen anything that proves it." "Margaret, listen carefully," he said. "Robert named her as executor, yes, but the estate is bound by the original living trust you both signed 20 years ago. That trust places you as primary beneficiary. Julia can't override that without a new document signed and notarized." I blinked. "So, unless there's a new version, she has no legal authority to force anything, not without your consent." I felt my spine straighten. "She's bluffing," I said. "Or hoping you're too heartbroken to push back," he replied gently. "Do you want me to come by this week?" "Yes," I said, quietly, "and bring a copy of the trust, please." We ended the call, and I stood there on the porch, heart pounding not with fear, but something sharper, a flicker of rage. She had lied to me. About the papers. About her authority. About everything. Later that day, when Julia returned, she found me folding laundry in the living room. She didn't say hello. Instead, she walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured herself 2 fingers of bourbon, and sat across from me. "We need to settle things," she said. I folded a towel, slow and deliberate. "You first." Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I know about the check, Julia," I said without lifting my gaze. "To the adoption agency in Charlotte, the one Dad sent before he died." Her breath caught just enough to confirm everything. "You went through his things? I found what you didn't bother to hide." She slammed her glass on the table. "You have no right." "I have every right," I snapped, rising to my feet. "This is my house, my life. And that child upstairs? I don't even know who he is." Her face darkened. "Don't bring Liam into this." "Why not?" I said. "He's already in the middle of it. You made sure of that." She stood too, furious now. "You're old, you're grieving, and you're confused." "No, Julia," I said firmly. "I'm not confused. I'm awake. And you're scared, because you know what happens when people start asking questions." She moved toward me, eyes blazing. For a second, I thought she might strike me, but she stopped herself. "Barely." "Careful, Mom," she hissed. "You don't want to make this uglier than it needs to be." I leaned closer. "It already is." That night, after she went upstairs, I retrieved the recorder again. I played back her words. Every threat, every lie. It was all there. And soon, it wouldn't just be in my hands. It would be in the hands of the law. The coffee shop on Maple and 3rd was quiet, just as I remembered. It was the kind of place where retirees played chess by the window and young mothers sipped lattes while toddlers tugged at their sleeves. Familiar, safe, unthreatening. That's why I chose it. Richard Hanley arrived right on time, gray suit, dark coat, leather briefcase worn smooth at the edges. He looked older than I remembered, but his eyes were sharp as ever. He spotted me immediately and gave a warm, tired smile. "Margaret," he said, pulling out the chair across from me, "thank you for trusting me with this." "Thank you for coming," I replied. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick, tabbed folder. "This," he said, laying it gently between us, "is the original trust Robert filed with my office 20 years ago. It was updated once, in 2017, but the terms remain largely the same." I reached for it slowly, my hands unsteady not from age but from anticipation. "There's something you should know," Richard added, his voice quiet, "before you read too far." I looked up, heart tightening. "What is it?" He hesitated, then tapped one of the tabs. Robert added a clause, a small allocation, $80,000 to be released to a woman named Evelyn Pierce in the event of his death. I blinked. "Evelyn?" "She wasn't listed as family," Richard said quickly. "No spouse designation, no dependent clause, just a line item, marked personal gift." My mind raced. "I never heard that name before," I whispered. Richard raised an eyebrow. "Robert never mentioned her?" "Never. Not once. Not in over 40 years. I turned to the page. There it was, in crisp black ink. Evelyn Pierce, $80,000, discretionary gift. Not a foundation. Not a hospital. A woman. You think she was? I can't say, Richard said carefully. But if Julia found out and thought that Evelyn posed a threat to her control of the estate, it might explain some of her urgency. Or her desperation, I murmured. I flipped through more of the trust documents. It was all there, just as Richard had said. The house, the lake property, retirement accounts, all left to me, with Julia as secondary. Executor, yes, but not owner. Not without my signature. Robert had protected me, even if he hadn't told me everything. I closed the folder slowly. Can you find Evelyn? Richard gave a slow nod. I can try, discreetly. I need to know who she is, I said. I need to know if this is just a gift or a secret. He placed his hand gently over mine. You always had a good sense for people, Margaret. Don't let grief shake that. I'm not grieving anymore, I said quietly. I'm watching. We ended the meeting after an hour. Richard promised to update me within a few days and asked me not to confront Julia until we knew more. I agreed, though the fire in my chest was harder and harder to contain. As I drove home, the same question kept circling in my mind. Who is Evelyn Pierce? Back at the house, Julia was in the kitchen again. This time, she didn't have a drink in hand. She was on her phone, pacing. When she saw me, she lowered her voice and turned away. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I moved to the living room, sat down, and picked up my notebook. Day 8. Confirmed, Julia is not primary heir. Robert left me the estate. Julia lied about her authority. New name in the trust, Evelyn Pierce. $80K. No explanation. Richard's searching for her now. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened Robert's dresser. In the top drawer, behind his ties, I found the old lockbox. I remembered the code our wedding date. It clicked open on the first try. Inside were letters, a few trinkets, and tucked into the bottom corner, an envelope addressed in Robert's handwriting. To be opened if I'm gone before I can explain. My heart stopped. With trembling fingers, I pulled it out, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened it. Margaret, if you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to tell you the truth myself. I wanted to, but I ran out of time. I didn't know how sick I was, not until it was too late. You'll find out about Evelyn. I know you will. Because you don't stop until you understand. That's always been your strength. Evelyn isn't a secret I'm proud of, but she isn't what you think either. She helped me. In a time when Julia was pulling away, when you and I were distant because of the cancer, Evelyn stepped in. Not romantically. She helped me organize legal things, medical planning. She even found the adoption agency Julia used. I didn't know what Julia was doing at first. Evelyn did. I don't know if Julia threatened her, but if anything happens, find Evelyn. She knows more than anyone. She tried to warn me. Please be careful. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I thought I had more time. Robert. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it back up, placed it in my notebook, and locked the box. Julia had built her plan thinking no one would question her, but Robert had left me the seeds of truth. Now it was up to me to grow them. It took Richard 2 days to find her. On the morning of the 3rd, he called while Julia was upstairs, probably organizing her next performance of grieving daughter. I stepped outside onto the back porch to take the call. She's alive, Richard said, voice quiet but urgent. She lives just outside Asheville. I spoke to her briefly, didn't give details, but she remembered Robert. Her voice trembled when I mentioned your name. Is she willing to talk? I asked. She said she's afraid, that Julia showed up at her door once, months ago, unannounced. My stomach dropped. Did she threaten her? Richard hesitated. Evelyn didn't say those words, but she asked me if you were safe. That tells me enough. I sat heavily on the bench. Can you give me her number? Only if you promise to be careful. Evelyn's been living under the radar for a reason. I'll be gentle, I said. I just want the truth. He gave me the number and hung up. I sat for a moment, staring at the screen. Then slowly, I dialed. The line rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered, soft, wary. Hello? Is this Evelyn Pierce? A pause. Who's calling? My name is Margaret Hale. I'm Robert's wife. Silence. I'm not calling to accuse you, I added quickly. I found a letter. He mentioned you. He said you helped him when he was sick, that you tried to warn him about Julia. A shaky breath came through the line. I was afraid this would happen, she said. Then it is true. Yes, she whispered. Robert. He wasn't stupid. He knew something was wrong, but Julia was so good at making people doubt themselves. Even her own father. I felt my chest tighten. What exactly did you help him with? Paperwork, financial documents, second opinions on his treatment. Julia wanted to rush everything. She said he needed to get his affairs in order as quickly as possible. But Robert started to hesitate. He told me once, if Margaret ever finds out I didn't protect her, I'll never forgive myself. I closed my eyes, steadying my voice. Did he know about Liam? Yes. Not at first. But when Julia showed up with him out of the blue, Robert asked questions. She claimed she was adopting him from a friend who'd passed away. Said it was private and that she didn't want to make a fuss. And the check? I told him not to send it, Evelyn said. It looked suspicious. But he said if he refused, Julia would shut him out completely. He still wanted to believe the best in her. She always knew how to weaponize guilt, I muttered. She does more than that, Evelyn said. She scared me, Margaret. That night she came to my house. She knew things. About my life, my finances, my daughter. My breath caught. She threatened your family? She didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear. Stay quiet, she said. Let the past rest. I moved 2 weeks later. Cut off everything. I clenched the phone tighter. I'm sorry. You helped Robert, and she punished you for it. She's dangerous, Margaret, Evelyn said. You need to get out of that house. I can't, I said. Not yet. I need to protect Liam. There was a pause. You still believe he's not hers? I know he's not. And he's scared. That boy deserves a life not built on lies. Another long silence. I can help you, Evelyn said finally. But not over the phone. Meet me. Somewhere safe. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Tell me when and where. We arranged to meet at a small public library in a neighboring town, quiet, neutral, safe. I ended the call and went back inside, finding Julia at the kitchen counter scrolling through her phone. Her eyes flicked up when she saw me. Out for a walk? She asked. Just needed air, I said, brushing past her. She didn't ask more, but I saw the way her fingers paused over her phone screen. She was watching me now, not like a daughter, like a threat. I went to my room, closed the door, and added a new entry to my notebook. Day 9. Spoke to Evelyn Pierce. Confirmed. She helped Robert in final months. Julia intimidated her. Julia lied about adoption. Evelyn offered to meet in person. Says I may be in danger. Meeting set for Thursday. I slid the notebook back into its hiding place and sat on the bed, staring at the floor. I had 2 days to prepare. 2 days before Evelyn would tell me everything. 2 days before this mask Julia wore finally cracked. But deep in my gut, I knew. Julia already sensed the storm coming, and she wouldn't wait quietly. It was drizzling the morning I drove to meet Evelyn. The road from our town to Belmont curved through wet pine and mist. The quiet was almost holy. I kept the window cracked just enough to feel the damp chill on my face, to stay awake, alert. In the back seat, my leather notebook sat beside the recorder. I wasn't going to take chances. Not now. The library was tucked into the corner of a historic district, brick walls, ivy creeping up the sides, and a little bronze bell that rang when you opened the door. Inside, it smelled of old books and lemon cleaner. Evelyn was already there. She sat in the far corner, by a window streaked with rain. She looked older than I expected, early 50s, maybe, but carried herself with caution. Her coat was worn, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her bag, but her eyes were steady when they met mine. Mrs. Hale, she said, standing. Clara, please, I offered, shaking her hand. Thank you for coming. We sat. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, two women brought together by another woman's secrets. She was the first to speak. You look tired. I am. She nodded. You've started to see what she's capable of, haven't you? Yes, I whispered, but not all of it. Not yet. Evelyn pulled a small folder from her bag. Then let me fill in the gaps. Inside were photocopies, medical forms, email transcripts, a patient directive with Robert's name, dated almost 11 months ago. I frowned. "I've never seen these." "You wouldn't have," she said. "They never left my office." "You worked for the hospital?" "I was part-time clerical support. I helped Robert coordinate his files when he started his treatment. He was always organized, but after the third chemo cycle, he started slipping. Julia took over most of the forms," she insisted. I flipped through the pages, my hands growing cold. "What's this?" I asked, pointing at one form. "This authorization signature. That's not his." "No," Evelyn said. "That's Julia's handwriting. I know because she made me notarize something with it once, and I saw how she curves the R." I felt dizzy. "She forged his consent?" "She forged more than that," Evelyn said grimly. "She submitted a revised medical directive stating she was to be given temporary control over all of Robert's medical and financial decisions if his condition worsened." "That's not legal," I said. He never would have signed that." She claimed he did. She submitted it with an old copy of his signature. "I tried to report it, but—" Her voice cracked. "What happened?" "She threatened my daughter." I froze. "She came to my house," Evelyn whispered. "She said she knew my daughter was applying to Stanford, knew we couldn't afford it without financial aid. She said, 'Things can disappear in processing, you know. Applications. Recommendation letters. People get buried in the system all the time.'" My heart raced. "She said that to you?" She smiled when she said it, Evelyn said, eyes wet now, like she was offering me tea. I sat back, stunned. Julia had gone further than I feared. She hadn't just manipulated Robert emotionally, she'd manufactured legal authority with forged documents and used fear to silence the only witness. "How do you know she didn't just scare him into agreeing?" I asked, the last piece of doubt clinging to my voice. "Because Robert left me this," Evelyn said, and handed me a small yellowing envelope. It was addressed in Robert's familiar hand. Inside was a note. "Evelyn, thank you for protecting the truth. I don't know how long I have, but if Margaret ever reaches you, tell her to look in the lake house drawer. I couldn't keep everything hidden. Tell her I'm sorry for letting Julia in." I stared at the letter. The lake house. That place had been locked since Robert's passing. Julia claimed she'd cleaned it out right after the funeral. I knew now why she rushed. I folded the letter and slipped it into my coat. "Evelyn, I need you. If I go to the police, they won't take just my word. But if you—" "I'll testify," she said. "I've lived in fear too long." We stood together. Two women who'd been lied to, manipulated, threatened. Two women choosing, finally, not to stay silent. "Thank you," I said, voice thick. "You've given me more than you know." As we parted, Evelyn touched my arm. "Be careful. She's desperate now. Desperate people don't think. They act." I drove home under a sky heavy with rain. But inside, I felt lighter. Because for the first time since Robert's death, I had proof. Not suspicions. Not whispers. But paper. Ink. Truth. And a locked drawer waiting to be opened. The lake house was exactly as we'd left it 2 years ago, still, silent, and shrouded in pine and fog. The key, long forgotten in a teacup in Robert's study, turned easily in the lock. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting dust or raccoons or ghosts. Instead, I was greeted by the faint scent of cedar and thyme. The air inside was cold, but the space was preserved wood-paneled walls, plaid throws on the sofa, and Robert's fishing rod still mounted above the mantel. This place had been our haven, our retreat, when the city overwhelmed us. Now it felt like the last corner of the world Julia hadn't poisoned. I moved to the writing desk by the window, heart pounding. I didn't know what I was looking for, exactly only that Robert had left something here, something he hadn't dared speak aloud. The top drawer was empty except for some old receipts and a broken flashlight. I opened the second one and froze. A brown leather-bound notebook lay flat, its edges worn and smudged with thumbprints. Next to it sat a flash drive, a small silver one with Robert's initials carved into the casing. My fingers trembled as I lifted both out. I sat down on the edge of the bed, opened the notebook, and began to read. Day 43. Julia brought a boy home today. Said his name was Liam. She didn't want to talk about the mother. Claimed she died in a car accident, but wouldn't give a name. Wouldn't let me speak to the agency. Something is wrong. I feel it. Margaret would ask questions, but she's away caring for her sister. Julia knew that. Day 59. I tried to speak to Liam privately. He didn't say much, but he flinched when she came into the room. That's not normal. Day 62. Found papers in Julia's bag. Not finalized. She's forging something. Evelyn says it's an adoption pre-approval form, but the address listed doesn't match the agency she mentioned. She's lying. Again. I flipped pages quickly. Now Robert had documented everything. Appointments Julia scheduled without his consent. Medical instructions he never gave. A bank withdrawal he hadn't signed. A call he overheard between Julia and an unknown man, though he managed to jot down a partial number. Day 74. I don't know how to stop her. Margaret must not be involved, not yet. Julia's watching her, waiting. I'm sending copies to Evelyn, keeping the originals here. If anything happens to me, I hope Margaret finds this. I just want her safe. My chest tightened. He had been trying, fighting, recording it all, even as the illness hollowed him. I plugged the flash drive into my phone adapter and opened the single audio file on it. Robert's voice crackled through the speaker. Weaker than I remembered, but steady. If you're hearing this, Margaret, then I failed. I couldn't stop her. But maybe you can. He went on to describe everything, his suspicions, Evelyn's help, the documents. He even named the fake notary Julia had used and her lawyer contact, someone named Ben Kolner. The entire file was 22 minutes of cold, clear evidence. I sat there for a long time, clutching the phone, the drive, the notebook. This was enough. More than enough. I could take this to Hanley, to the authorities. I could end Julia's scheme once and for all. I rose to leave. That's when I heard the car. Gravel crunching outside. Too late. I didn't even have time to hide the notebook before the front door slammed open. Julia stood in the doorway, hair damp from the rain, eyes burning. I knew it, she hissed. I knew you'd come here. How did you know? She held up her phone. You're not subtle, Mother. I have the GPS on your car. I saw you leave the house with that stupid look on your face. I knew where you were going. I stepped back slowly, the flash drive still clenched in my palm. Stay away from me, Julia. She laughed. Stay away? After everything I've done for this family? You mean everything you've stolen? She stepped closer. You never appreciated me, she snapped. You think just because you married him, you were entitled to everything. He never respected me. Not like you, always Margaret this, Margaret that. I deserved more. You deserved a father's love, I said softly. Not his bank account. She flinched, just slightly. Give me what's in your hand, she demanded, stepping forward. No. Her eyes narrowed. You really want to make this hard? I stared her down. You already did. There was a long silence between us, just the ticking of the old clock on the wall and the wind pushing against the window panes. She exhaled sharply. You won't win. I don't have to win, I whispered. I just have to tell the truth. And with that, I turned and walked past her, out the door, into the rain. She didn't follow. Not yet, but I knew this wasn't over. It had just begun. The rain hadn't stopped by the time I reached Hanley's office. It clung to the windows, misting the glass so the entire world looked smudged, like a memory. My coat was soaked through, my hands stiff, but I walked into that building like I was marching to battle with Robert's notebook in one hand and the flash drive zipped into my purse like a weapon. Hanley's receptionist led me in immediately. He rose when he saw me, concern tightening the corners of his face. Margaret, you look like someone who just stared down the devil, I said, and made it out alive. I sat and handed him the notebook first, then the drive. He took his time flipping through the pages, listening to the audio with his earbuds. I didn't interrupt. I just watched his eyes darken as the truth came to life. When he was done, he leaned back slowly. Well, he said, voice grim, you weren't imagining it. I never was. This is damning, Margaret. The forged documents, the unauthorized adoption, the financial coercion, it's enough to open a criminal investigation. And Robert's voice? I asked. That recording alone could get a court to freeze the estate. It proves intent to protect you, and that Julia acted outside her authority. I exhaled, but it wasn't relief. Not yet. What's the next step? I'll file a motion with the probate court first thing tomorrow, he said. We'll request an emergency injunction to halt any transfer of funds or sale of assets under Julia's control. She'll see that as an attack, I warned. She's already attacked you, he said gently. This is defense. I nodded slowly. And Liam? Hanley paused. He's the wild card, he admitted. We don't know his legal status. If she forged anything in the adoption, we'll need child services involved. She'll run, I whispered. If she thinks she's cornered, she'll disappear with him. Then we act fast. I'll request a supervised custody hold, but we need someone in the house to make sure he's not moved. I'll stay, I said. Are you sure? She doesn't scare me anymore. We finalized the filing plans, and I promised to return the next morning to sign the formal affidavit. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. For the first time in weeks, the sky cracked open with pale afternoon light. Not sun, just the suggestion of it, but it was enough. I drove home slowly, thinking through every move. Julia would sense something. She always did. But she wouldn't expect what I had in mind next. That night, after dinner, I gathered everyone into the sitting room. Julia, Liam, and even Maria, who hovered in the doorway with a dish towel in her hands. Julia raised an eyebrow. What's this? A family meeting, I said, voice calm. We don't do those, she said, scoffing. We do now. She folded her arms but didn't leave. I stood by the fireplace, Robert's old chair behind me, like a ghost lending me his spine. I've spent the past few weeks grieving, questioning, doubting myself, I began. But no more. I looked at Julia. I know everything, Julia. About the forged signatures, the threats, the stolen authority. She didn't flinch, but her mouth tightened. And Liam, I continued, turning to the boy. Sweetheart, I know none of this is your fault. You didn't ask for any of it, but you deserve better than to be used. Julia's voice sliced in. Used? Really? You're accusing me in front of him? I'm speaking the truth, I said. And tomorrow, the court will hear it too. Maria gasped softly behind me. Liam looked at Julia, confused. Grandma? He asked. What does she mean? Julia stood. She means she's lost her mind, she snapped. She thinks everyone's against her. No, I said firmly. I think you've spent your life manipulating everyone who loved you, including your father, but that ends now. She took a step forward. You want to fight? No, I said. I want peace. For Liam, for Robert's memory, for this family. She shook her head. You think a judge is going to believe a lonely old widow over her own daughter? I think they'll believe evidence, I replied. And they'll believe Robert because he told the truth before he died. In his own voice. That stopped her. For the first time, real fear flickered in her eyes. She turned to Liam, desperate. Don't listen to her, baby. She's just trying to scare you. But Liam, bless his soul, looked down at the floor. Quiet, thoughtful. He wasn't sure anymore. And that was all I needed. I'm done playing games, I said. Tomorrow it goes to court. And if you try to leave with him tonight, I swear, Julia, I'll call every police station in the state. We locked eyes. She knew I meant it. She didn't say another word. She walked out of the room without looking back. I sank into Robert's old chair, every bone in my body trembling, but my spirit steadier than it had been in years. Maria brought me tea without a word and rested her hand on my shoulder. I took a long breath. Tomorrow, we went to war. But tonight, I'd finally claimed the house again. And my name. The courtroom smelled like cold marble and old paper, a scent I hadn't breathed in since Robert's brief probate hearing over his parents' estate nearly 25 years ago. That day, we'd held hands in the front row, sure of our place, proud of our dignity. Now I sat alone. Hanley was beside me, briefcase firm in his lap, but it was my name on the motion, my face that met Julia's across the aisle. She didn't even blink. Her lawyer, Ben Kulner, sat beside her sleek suit, younger than I expected, probably the same one she'd whispered to over the phone the night Robert died. He leaned toward her as the judge entered, but Julia didn't respond. She just kept her eyes on me, like this was a game, and I was the next piece to knock over. The judge, Honorable Elaine McMurtry, settled into her chair and adjusted her glasses. Late 60s, silver hair, no patience for drama. I liked her instantly. We're here today for an emergency review of the Hale estate and a motion to freeze assets under the control of the executor, she began, glancing down at the docket. Petitioner, Margaret Hale, widow of Robert Hale, alleges misconduct, forgery, and breach of fiduciary duty. Her eyes lifted to mine. Mrs. Hale, please stand. I did. Do you swear the contents of your affidavit are true to the best of your knowledge and belief? I do. She nodded, motioned me to sit, then turned to Julia. Miss Hale, do you contest the motion? Julia rose slowly, her posture perfect. Yes, Your Honor. These accusations are outrageous. My mother is grieving and confused. She's being manipulated by people who want to divide this family. Your Honor, Hanley interjected calmly, rising. We have physical evidence. Signed documents with clear mismatches in handwriting, medical directives filed without proper witness, and a personal audio recording from Mr. Hale himself outlining his concerns. The judge held up a hand. We'll hear it all, step by step. Hanley walked her through the notebook first, each entry tagged and highlighted. He'd prepared it like a thesis, no embellishment, no drama, just the quiet, devastating words of a man slowly watching his legacy slip away. Then came the flash drive. The courtroom was silent as Robert's voice played worn, but clear. If you're hearing this, Margaret, then I failed. I couldn't stop her. But maybe you can. You could have heard a pin drop. Even Colner shifted uncomfortably. When the recording ended, Judge McMurtry leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. Miss Hale, she said, turning to Julia, can you explain why your father would feel compelled to create such a recording? Julia didn't hesitate. He was ill, weak, easily confused. My mother, she's always been strong-willed. I believe she planted doubt in his mind. I see, the judge said. And what about the signature discrepancies on the revised directives? Colner jumped in. We contest the authenticity of the documents presented. We request time for a handwriting expert to review both versions. I'm inclined to allow that, McMurtry said. But in the meantime, I'm freezing all movement of Hale estate funds, including the Hale Trust and any real property sales, pending further investigation. Julia flinched. Colner leaned in, whispering. But the judge wasn't finished. In addition, I want to address the minor child, Liam. There are concerns regarding his custody and legal adoption. Has Child Protective Services been notified? Hanley stood. Yes, Your Honor. We've submitted a formal inquiry. The agency in question has not been able to produce original adoption records signed by both parties. McMurtry scribbled something, then looked to Julia. Miss Hale, where is the boy now? At home, she replied coolly, with our housekeeper. I'm placing a temporary protective order. Until we confirm guardianship, the boy is to remain in the home under supervised care. Neither party may remove him from the county. I let out a slow breath. That was all I needed for now. As the gavel came down to close the session, Julia brushed past me near the exit, her smile tight. You always loved theatrics, she whispered. I didn't write that notebook, I replied. Your father did. She paused. For a moment, her eyes flickered something almost vulnerable there. Then it hardened. You're destroying your family. No, I said. I'm saving what's left of it. Back outside, Hanley offered me his arm as we walked toward the car. She'll fight harder now, he said. I know. We'll need more than Robert's voice if this goes to full trial. Then I'll find more, I said, because I'm not letting her take Liam, and I'm not letting her erase Robert's truth. We parted ways at the parking lot. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed. A message from Maria. Julia just left the house. She packed a bag, took the black suitcase. I stared at the screen, blood cooling. Then another message followed. But she left Liam behind. I gripped the steering wheel. She was running, but not with the child. Which meant one thing. Julia had a different plan, and I needed to find out what it was before it was too late. When I arrived home, the house was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the tense, stretched thin kind, like the air itself was holding its breath. Maria met me at the door, eyes wide. She's gone, she whispered. Packed a bag, took cash from the drawer, left about 20 minutes after you. Where's Liam? In his room, he asked if he did something wrong. I closed my eyes, steadied my breath. No, I said. He did nothing wrong. This isn't his fault. Maria reached into her apron pocket and held out a small, padded envelope. She left this on the table, addressed to you. I took it with a cold, growing sense of dread. Inside was a folded note and a flash drive. The note was written in Julia's angular, precise handwriting. Mother, since you're so determined to paint me as a monster, I figured I might as well play the part. You never saw me, never cared to. Always so wrapped up in Robert's world, his house, his money, his rules. You never made room for me, and now you're trying to erase me completely. You've taken everything. But don't worry, I'm not gone. I'll get it back. My way. Say hi to the boy. I won't need him anymore. The signature was just an initial, J. My hands shook as I turned to the drive. I plugged it into the laptop on the kitchen counter, Maria hovering behind me, whispering prayers in Spanish. The file was a video. Julia's face filled the screen, eyes rimmed with shadow, jaw clenched. I know you're watching, Mother, she began. So let me ask you something. What would you do if your entire life was built on someone else's lies? Would you just walk away? She gave a bitter smile. Robert was a hypocrite, always pretending to be the perfect husband, the devoted father. But he hated me. Do you know how that feels? To be unwanted by your own blood? She leaned closer to the camera. You always loved him more than me. So I did what I had to do. I built my own legacy. Liam? He was a tool, a key to unlock what was mine. And you ruined it. Her voice dropped to a whisper. But you don't win yet. You think that judge scares me? You think paperwork and sympathy mean anything? I know how this game works, and I have pieces left to play. Then she reached forward and ended the recording. I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. She's unraveling, Maria whispered. She's not well. She's dangerous, I said flatly, and we don't know what she's planning. I called Hanley immediately. She's fled, I told him. Left a message. Threats. Implied she's giving up on Liam but not on the estate. I'll update the court, he said, and call in a welfare check. But if she's out of state already, it gets complicated. She won't run far, I said. She wants to be close. She needs to watch. She also might try to destroy evidence, Hanley warned, or intimidate witnesses. I have to keep Liam safe. Let's request a temporary guardianship order in your name. It'll protect him legally. I agreed, and we began moving quickly. Filings, notarizations, scheduled emergency reviews. That night, after Maria tucked Liam into bed, I sat beside him, brushing his hair gently. Grandma, he asked softly, am I going away? No, sweetheart, you're staying here. Where it's safe. Mom said I wasn't really hers. Is that true? The question stabbed through me. I took a deep breath. She adopted you, I said carefully. But that doesn't mean she didn't care. It just means you came from somewhere else first. A different story. One we'll find together if you want. He was quiet. Did she lie a lot? Yes, I whispered. But I won't. He nodded. Then, after a moment, he asked the question I'd been dreading. Do you love me? Even if I'm not really part of the family? I wrapped my arms around him so tightly I thought I might break. Liam, I said, voice trembling. You are mine, no matter what. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. He didn't respond, but he buried his face in my shoulder. I stayed there long after he fell asleep, afraid to let go, because I knew Julia was still watching, still waiting. And the next move would be hers. 2 days passed with no word from Julia. Not a text, not a whisper. But that didn't make things calmer, it only made the quiet louder, more dangerous. Hanley spent every hour he could assembling evidence. I spent every hour watching Liam, making sure he felt safe even as fear curled in my stomach like smoke. On the third morning, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was low, male, and hesitant. Is this Mrs. Margaret Hale? Yes, I said slowly. My name is Daniel Marks. I was a colleague of Robert's. We used to serve on the University Foundation Board together. I remembered the name vaguely. Polite dinners, charity auctions. I'm sorry to bother you, he continued, but I saw the court notice in the local paper. Julia's name, the estate freeze. He cleared his throat. There's something you should know. Robert opened a second trust 10 years ago, one not connected to the main Hale estate. I sat up straighter. What kind of trust? He called it the Ashmere account, said it was for educational outreach, but Julia had access to it through an older power of attorney, never revoked. My heart dropped. Where is it? Offshore, Bahamas. Legal, but discreet. It hasn't been touched in years, until last week. I felt a chill bloom down my spine. Last week? Yes. A transfer $220,000. Julia's name was attached to the authorization. I thanked him, promised to update the court. But my mind was already racing. She wasn't just running. She was funding something. A disappearance? A bribe? A payoff? I called Hanley immediately. She's moving money from outside the country, I told him. Robert never told me about the Ashmere Trust. Probably because he feared Julia might manipulate it, he said. We need to trace that transfer. Can you freeze it? I can try, but it's offshore. Time is not our friend. As he handled the legal side, I turned to the human side. Julia didn't operate alone. She never had the stomach for details. Someone helped her file those papers. Someone helped her move that money. I started making calls. Former employees, distant cousins, anyone she may have whispered to during her climb to power. But no one knew where she was. No one except Liam. That night, while we made cocoa together in the kitchen, he said something that stopped my breath. She told me we were going on a boat someday. I set the spoon down slowly. A boat? Yeah. She showed me pictures once, said we'd go where people couldn't find us. I crouched down beside him. Do you remember where the boat was? What it was called? He bit his lip, thinking hard. It had a name with a bird, something white. I pulled up my laptop, began searching marina records along the coast. Finally, I found it. The White Heron, registered to Julia Hale, docked in Charleston Harbor, moored 3 weeks ago. I called Hanley again. We've got her. You think she's there now? I think she's going there. To disappear. To take whatever's left and vanish. You can't go alone, Margaret. I won't, I said. I'm bringing Liam. He deserves to know who she really is. He hesitated. This is dangerous. She's more dangerous when no one's watching. I packed that night, nothing dramatic. Just essentials. I left a note with Maria and gave her Hanley's number in case anything happened. Then I buckled Liam into the back seat, heart thudding, and headed south before dawn. Charleston greeted us with salt air and storm-gray skies. I checked us into a modest inn near the marina under a different name, Clara Belle, a nod to my childhood dog, and waited until the sun began to fall. Liam was quiet during dinner. He pushed his food around his plate, then looked up at me suddenly. Do you think she's really bad? I thought for a moment before answering. I think she's broken. And when people don't fix what's broken inside them, they can hurt others. Do you hate her? I took his hand. No, but I don't trust her, and I won't let her hurt you again. He nodded, eyes glassy. Can I stay with you forever? You already are. He climbed into my lap then, head on my shoulder, and I held him there as long as I could. Later that evening, I walked down to the dock alone. The boat was there. The White Heron. Sleek, white, silent. Its lights were off. No movement inside. But it was ready. Full fuel tanks. GPS console. And tucked under the nameplate was a dock receipt paid through the end of the week. She was coming. I took a photo, sent it to Hanley with the timestamp. Then I stood there in the dark, listening to the tide. Julia thought she could slip away, but the tide never keeps secrets. It always brings things back to shore. It was just past midnight when Julia appeared. She came down the dock like a shadow hood pulled low, duffel bag slung over one shoulder. Her heels clacked against the wooden planks, echoing in the still harbor air. The boat lights flicked on a second later. She'd activated them remotely. She was ready. I stood behind a piling, watching, phone clenched in my hand. I'd already sent Hanley my location. The Charleston police were on alert, just waiting for confirmation that Julia was attempting to flee the state. But I needed to see her. I needed her to say it. Julia stepped aboard the White Heron like she belonged there. She moved quickly, efficiently. Fuel check, storage hatch, GPS. Then she turned, as if sensing something. I know you're there, Mother, she called out. Might as well come out. I stepped forward slowly, keeping my voice calm. You really thought you could just sail away? She smirked, not surprised. Of course I did. That's what you do when the house is on fire, isn't it? You escape. It's not the house that's on fire, Julia. It's the lies. She rolled her eyes. Spare me the sermon. You already have the estate frozen. You've turned the court against me. What more do you want? I want Liam to be safe. I want Robert's name cleared. And I want you to face what you've done. She dropped the bag with a thud. And then what? You'll forgive me? Wrap me in a hug like some after-school special? No, I said, I'll never forgive what you did to Robert, or to me, but this could be your moment to stop running. She laughed, loud and sharp. You really don't get it, do you? You think this is about the money? The documents? I lived my entire life in that house with a man who barely saw me and a mother who only loved me when I was quiet. That's not true. It is, she shouted, stepping toward me. You think I don't remember the way you'd shut down whenever I questioned something? The way Robert looked past me, like I was an annoyance? You were angry, I said, and instead of dealing with it, you punished everyone else. She didn't deny it. Instead, her voice dropped. I found a way to matter. I built control. I gave Liam a future. You used Liam. You never saw him as a child, just a pawn. Julia's face twisted. You think I didn't love him? I think you loved the power he gave you, and that's not the same. She looked away, for the first time unsure. Then, softly, do you even know what it's like to be born second? Always compared, always a step behind the golden boy or the golden mother. I know what it's like to lose a child to their own bitterness, I said, and I won't lose Liam the same way. There was silence between us. Then Julia looked back at the boat, then at me. I'll make you a deal. There's no deal left. Listen, she said, voice lower now. You let me leave. No cops, no charges. I disappear, and in return I sign over everything. The house, the trust, all of it. I stared at her. You want to negotiate with a child's life? No. I want peace. I want out. I'll walk away forever. You've already done that, I said. You left him behind. She shrugged. I realized I was never going to be the kind of mother he needed. At least I knew when to quit. My voice dropped. You're right about one thing. You can't be the mother he needs, but you can still be the woman who stops doing harm. She scoffed. You called the cops, didn't you? I did. Siren lights flickered in the distance, reflected faintly in the harbor water. Julia didn't run. She just stared at the water, the lights growing brighter. He loved you more than me, she said quietly. I didn't choose that, but you didn't stop it either. I stepped closer. I see you, Julia. I've always seen you. But I also see what you've become. And this has to end. She looked at me. No hate this time. Just a worn-out ache. Then she said something that surprised me. I'm tired. The police car pulled up at the edge of the dock. Officers stepped out slowly, hands lowered, calm voices. Julia raised her hands. And for the first time in years, maybe her entire life, she surrendered. Not just to them, to the truth. As they cuffed her and walked her up the dock, she paused beside me. I still don't regret everything, she said. You don't have to, but you'll answer for it. She gave a small nod, and then she was gone. The white heron rocked gently in her absence. I stayed behind a while longer, listening to the tide and the quiet cry of gulls overhead. The night was heavy with salt and sadness, but also something else, finality. Tomorrow, I would bring Liam home. But tonight, I let the waves carry away what was left of Julia Hale. We returned home just before sunset. The house felt different, not just because Julia was gone, but because Liam was here. Present. Laughing again. He ran ahead of me through the hallway, his shoes thudding against the hardwood floors like small, rhythmic heartbeats. Maria had baked banana bread. I didn't know what he liked, she said, smiling as she wiped her hands. So I made what you liked. Close enough. We both watched as Liam devoured 2 slices and then fell asleep on the couch, hugging the throw blanket with his name stitched in gold. I don't remember buying it. Maybe Robert did. Maybe he knew long before I did that this child would become our second chance. Later that evening, after Liam had been carried up to bed and the kitchen was quiet again, Hanley called. They're holding her without bail, he said. Flight risk. And the charges? Forgery, fraud, child endangerment, possibly obstruction depending on what else we find. Will she go to prison? That depends. Her lawyer's already negotiating. They might try for a psychiatric evaluation. I sighed. That would be fitting. She's unwell, Margaret, but she's not innocent. No, I agreed. She's not. We ended the call. I stood in Robert's old study, bathed in amber lamplight. The bookshelves still held his gardening guides, journals, history books. His desk remained untouched. I opened a drawer to store some court paperwork and found a small envelope, unsealed, yellowing slightly at the edges. It was addressed in cursive to Robert Hale. No return address. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Robert, you may think I'm overstepping, but I've seen the way Julia speaks to people, especially the boy. She isn't just wounded, she's dangerous. There's something hollow in her eyes, like she's always calculating, waiting. I don't say this to hurt you, but to protect you. If she moves into your home, make sure you protect yourself. And Margaret, please, asterisk, E.M. There was no date, no further context. I turned the envelope over. Nothing. But the handwriting, I recognized the E. Evelyn, Robert's old friend from university. The same Evelyn who'd notarized some of our early adoption papers before Julia manipulated the process. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Why had Robert kept this? Why hadn't he shown me? Was it guilt? Or fear? I stared at the letter a long while, then made a decision. The next morning, I called Hanley. I need a day, I said, to follow something. He didn't argue. Need backup? Not yet. I drove north 3 hours to the town where Evelyn had retired, according to the last Christmas card she'd sent us. When she opened the door, I barely recognized her. Shorter than I remembered. Slower. But her eyes were as clear and sharp as ever. Margaret Hale, she said. You look like a woman who has walked through fire. I stepped inside. She made tea, as always, and poured it into blue china cups with trembling hands. Then I handed her the letter. She didn't deny it. I wrote that after she called me demanding I notarize an early withdrawal from one of Robert's funds, she said. He wasn't even sick yet. But she claimed he wanted to update things privately. You refused? Of course. But I also saw her with Liam. That child looked terrified to speak. She sipped her tea. I thought Robert would listen. I thought he'd step in. But he didn't. He protected me, I said quietly. But not himself. Evelyn looked down. She hated you, Margaret. Not because of anything you did, but because you were chosen. Again and again. By Robert. By the community, even by the boy. Julia lived in a world where she was always second. She made herself second, I murmured. She couldn't see it that way. We spoke for hours about Robert, about the things Evelyn had seen and suspected. Then she said something that made me sit upright. She mentioned someone, a woman named Lexi. She said Lexi would make things disappear. Documents, debts, anything. Do you remember a last name? No. But she said it once during a call, something like Fallow or Faller. That name stuck in my mind the whole drive back. I searched everything I could, court records, business directories, former estate staff, and there it was. Alexis Fallon, a paralegal in a private probate firm based out of Augusta, Georgia. One of the firms Julia had visited in secret 2 months before Robert's death. I forwarded the name to Hanley. If she altered any official documents for Julia, we need her on record. Already on it, he replied. She's been subpoenaed. Let's see what she gives us. But even as I passed that burden to Hanley, I knew the real task ahead was Liam. He needed stability. He needed truth. That night, I sat beside his bed, stroking his hair gently. Can I ask you something? He whispered. Always. If Mom's not coming back, do I have to forget her? My chest ached. No, sweetheart. You never have to forget anyone. But you get to choose what you carry forward. You don't have to carry the pain. He thought about that. Then, quietly, can I carry you instead? I laughed softly, tears stinging. Yes, I said. You can carry me, and I'll carry you. That's how families work. He reached for my hand. And in that moment, I knew this was where healing began. Not with verdicts, not with revenge, but with love. The days after I returned from Evelyn's passed with the quiet urgency of preparation. Hanley worked around the clock with investigators. I took Liam to school, cooked real dinners again, and made our house feel less like a courtroom and more like a home. But beneath it all, the pulse of unfinished business kept beating. Then, one morning, Hanley called. Alexis Fallon cracked, he said. She agreed to testify in exchange for immunity. I nearly dropped the phone. She admitted to forging documents? 2 sets, he confirmed. 1, a backdated power of attorney that allowed Julia to access Robert's offshore account. 2, Amended adoption document stripping you of any say, placing sole custody under Julia's name. I sat down slowly. And the cost? $10,000 per document. Cash. I closed my eyes. It wasn't the money that stung. It was the precision. Julia had planned every inch. She had dismantled my life one signature at a time. Fallon also mentioned a third name, Hanley continued. One we didn't know. Who? Eleanor French. She ran a nonprofit Robert donated to a scholarship fund. Apparently, Julia used Eleanor's credentials to siphon money under a false grant. I felt something clench in my chest. Robert's nonprofit. His pride. She stole from his charity, I whispered. Hanley confirmed it. Julia had funneled nearly $50,000 from the fund to a shell account, using grant applications that were never reviewed. Fallon created the paperwork. Eleanor signed it unknowingly, most likely under pressure. We're building the financial fraud case separately, he said, but it strengthens the probate motion, and the jury will hear all of it. I thanked him, hung up, and stared out the window for a long time. This wasn't just betrayal. This was desecration. Robert's legacy, his generosity, his trust, all turned into tools for power. That evening, while tidying the living room, Liam called out from Robert's study. "Grandma, I found something." He emerged holding a small leather notebook different from the others, older, cracked along the spine. "Where was it?" I asked. "Behind the bookcase. It fell when I bumped the shelf." I took it with shaking hands. Inside were Robert's notes more personal than the ones Hanley used in court. These weren't about finances. They were about us. July 3. Margaret looked tired today. I wanted to tell her she doesn't have to carry all of this alone, but I froze. Again, I always think too long and miss the moment. That's the problem with regret, it shows up too late. August 2. Julia asked me again about Liam's trust fund. I said no. She smiled like she expected it. I worry I've taught her that smiles are weapons. What did we do wrong? What did I do wrong? September 2. I should have told Margaret about the offshore account, but I was afraid. Afraid it would sound like I didn't trust her. But the truth is, I don't trust Julia, not with anything that matters. Page after page, his thoughts unraveled like thread. Not angry, not vengeful, just worried. A man watching a storm he didn't know how to stop. The last entry was written in shaky script. October 19. If I don't wake up tomorrow, I hope this is found. I'm scared. Not of death, but of what might be left behind. Julia will twist it all. I see it now. But if Margaret reads this, I want her to know. She was always right, and I should have listened sooner. My throat closed up. I clutched the notebook to my chest and wept not just for the man I lost, but for all the words he never got to say aloud. When Liam came back into the room, he didn't ask why I was crying. He just sat beside me, rested his head against my shoulder. And we stayed that way until the sun went down. The next morning, I brought the notebook to Hanley. "It won't hold up in court," he said gently, flipping through the pages. "Too personal, too emotional." "I know," I said, "but I want the jury to hear it anyway." He raised an eyebrow. "Tell it in testimony?" "No," I said. "Read it. At the close of trial, after everything else." He smiled. "Let's make it happen." 2 days later, Julia's arraignment was held. She appeared in court looking gaunt but composed, hair tied back, no makeup, designer suit replaced by prison-issue beige. She didn't look at me once. Her lawyer entered a plea of not guilty on all charges. Hanley didn't flinch. We knew this was just the beginning. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered. I didn't speak to them, but I held Liam's hand the entire way to the car. He asked one question as we pulled away. "Is she going to jail forever?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Justice, in this country, wasn't perfect, but it was in motion, and this time, it had a direction. The courtroom was cold, the kind of institutional chill that seeps into your bones, no matter how many layers you wear. It was the first day of the trial. Julia sat at the defense table, flanked by her attorney and a new paralegal. Her posture was impeccable, her face unreadable. But I saw the nervous twitch in her left hand, the way she rubbed her thumb against her palm in a slow, repetitive motion, something she used to do as a child during thunderstorms. Hanley opened with quiet, firm clarity. He didn't dramatize. He didn't need to. He presented a timeline of forged documents, misappropriated funds, and calculated manipulation. He projected Julia's signature alongside the one Robert had used for years, letting the jurors compare. He played the voicemail Robert had recorded before his death. A chill passed through the room as his voice filled the space again, cracking under strain but resolute. "You're hearing this because I'm afraid. Afraid that Julia will twist the truth after I'm gone. Please, don't let her." The words hung like mist over us. Then Hanley presented the testimony from Alexis Fallon, who recounted the hush payments, the falsified notary stamps, and the 2 private meetings Julia had arranged late at night, always off the books, always in cash. She told me, and I quote, Fallon said, "It's not illegal if they never find out." Julia didn't react. Not to Fallon, not to the screenshots of emails, not even to the court-ordered financial audit showing her shell account and the diverted charity grants. But she stiffened when Hanley pulled out the leather notebook. "I understand this isn't legal evidence," he said, turning to the judge. "But with the court's permission, I'd like to read an excerpt not as proof of guilt, but as the voice of the man whose legacy is at the heart of this case." The judge nodded. Hanley cleared his throat. He read, "I should have told Margaret about the offshore account, but I was afraid it would sound like I didn't trust her, but the truth is I don't trust Julia. Not with anything that matters. And then, if I don't wake up tomorrow, I hope this is found. Julia will twist it all. I see it now. But if Margaret reads this, I want her to know she was always right, and I should have listened sooner." There were murmurs across the room. One juror dabbed her eye. Even the judge sat a little straighter. I didn't cry. I'd already shed every tear in private. But I looked across the aisle at Julia, and for a brief moment, I saw something shift in her face. Not remorse, not sadness, but recognition, as if she finally heard his voice, as if it finally meant something. Her defense team called only 2 witnesses, both character references from her professional circles, people who admitted she was ambitious, assertive, misunderstood. None stayed on the stand for more than 10 minutes. None made eye contact with her afterward. On the 4th day, the judge asked Julia if she wished to testify. She stood slowly, then shook her head. "No, Your Honor." There was no gasp, no surprise. She'd said all she wanted to say long ago, but the silence that followed was louder than any defense. In closing, Hanley didn't ask for punishment. He asked for recognition. "We're not here to punish a daughter," he said. "We're here to restore the voice of a man who saw the truth too late and to protect the boy caught in the middle." It was the shortest closing argument I'd ever heard, and the most powerful. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the foreperson didn't hesitate. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." Julia didn't flinch. She stared forward. Not at me. Not at Liam, who sat in the gallery beside Maria, clutching the same worn blanket he had that first night. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following week. As the bailiff moved to escort Julia away, she paused just once. She turned her head, slowly, until her eyes met mine. There was no plea, no apology. But for the first time in years, I saw my daughter not the woman she became, but the little girl who once clung to my hand on the first day of school. And I nodded. Not in forgiveness, but in farewell. I didn't attend the sentencing. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was a choice, a line drawn not from anger, but from healing. That morning, I made pancakes for Liam. We added blueberries and extra syrup, and he laughed when I burned the first batch. "I like them a little burnt," he said. "Then I did it on purpose," I replied. We ate at the table Robert built with his own hands, the morning light pouring through the window. I watched Liam eat, his cheeks full, his eyes brighter than I'd seen them in months. I realized I didn't need to watch Julia be led away. I'd already witnessed enough endings. Hanley texted me later with the outcome. 10 years. Eligible for parole after 6. Mandatory therapy. Asset forfeiture. She didn't speak, he wrote. Just nodded when the judge read the sentence. I thanked him, then turned off my phone. We had a picnic that afternoon. Just me, Liam, and Maria. We drove out to Harper's Hill, the place where Robert and I first brought Julia as a baby. The trees were taller now. The bench was faded, but the breeze was the same, warm, gentle, forgiving. Liam brought a book. Maria brought lemonade. I brought silence. It was the kind that doesn't ache anymore, the kind that feels earned. As the sun dipped low, Liam asked if we could write letters to the sky. Like messages? Yeah, he said. To Grandpa, maybe even Mom. I hesitated, but then nodded. He ran off to find twigs and string, determined to build a kite out of nothing but faith and paper scraps. Maria helped him, and I sat alone with my journal. I didn't write to Julia. I wrote to myself, to the version of me who had once believed in the permanence of love. Dear Clara, you thought grief would break you. It didn't. You thought betrayal would harden you. It didn't. You thought love was something you earned by giving everything. But now you know love is something you protect by giving it wisely. You didn't fail, Julia. You didn't fail, Robert. You simply loved them the best you could with what you had. And now, you have Liam. He is not your second chance. He is your next chapter. Let it begin. I folded the page, tucked it into the journal, and closed it. Liam came running back, holding up his creation, an uneven, lopsided kite with a bright red tail. It won't fly, he warned. Then we'll run faster, I said. And we did. We ran across the hill, laughing, barefoot in the grass, the wind catching just enough to lift the tail, if not the whole kite. It didn't matter. We were already soaring. Later that night, after Liam had fallen asleep on the couch with ice cream on his chin, I stood by the window and watched the stars come out. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the next crisis. I wasn't scanning for shadows. I was simply still. This was my justice. Not a sentence in court, but a boy asleep in peace. A home reclaimed. A name cleared. A heart healed. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom, it comes from choosing peace over revenge. This story teaches us that the deepest wounds often come from within our own families, but healing is possible when we stop chasing punishment and start rebuilding love. Clara's strength wasn't in winning the legal battle, it was in protecting the future of an innocent child, honoring the truth of a lost husband, and finding the courage to let go of the bitterness that nearly consumed her. In the end, justice wasn't about seeing her daughter punished, it was about reclaiming her dignity, restoring her voice, and showing that quiet resilience can be the most powerful kind of justice there is.